2025 has been a rough year, to say the least. We've seen more than our fair share of intensified disasters, tipping points crossed, and backpedaling from political moguls. But that does not mean that this year was without its good news. From a renewable transition to protecting ecosystems to more indigenous stewardship, there have been monumental steps in the right direction this year. So I present to you the State of the Climate 2025, a summary of the worst and best climate change updates of the year. And if you haven't yet, please hit that subscribe button to support the channel and climate science on YouTube. A lot has happened around the world since January, so let's get right into it. Perhaps one year I won't have to say this, but 2025 continued the trend of record high levels of CO2 in the atmosphere. This year, CO2 concentrations at the Mauna Loa Observatory peaked in May at 430.2 ppm, an increase of over 3 ppm from last year. The average atmospheric methane concentration is still increasing too, up to around 1930 parts per billion. But despite a continuous increase in greenhouse gases, the global average temperature slightly decreased from last year, with an estimated warming of 1.48 degrees C above pre-industrial temperatures. This is because Earth is a dynamic system, cycling heat through the air and water through systems like El Niño and La Niña in the Pacific Ocean. In late 2024 and throughout 2025, the Pacific flirted with La Niña conditions, leading to cooler surface temperatures. It's unlikely that a full-blown La Niña is in the works for 2026, but a neutral condition will still keep the Earth cooler than what we saw during the El Niño of 2023 and 24. Even with a slightly cooler year, the excess heat in our atmosphere has led to some extreme disasters. This summer saw some of the worst heat waves to ever hit Europe. An estimated 24,400 people died across the continent from heat-related causes. And while heat waves have always been a part of Europe's climate, a study from Imperial College London found that climate change was responsible for 2.2 degrees C hotter temperatures during this event. This directly led to 16,500 additional deaths, meaning 68% of the fatalities in this heat wave were due to climate change. And this intense heat was followed by intense fires. Greece, Turkey, Spain, Portugal, Ukraine, and many other European nations were ravaged by wildfires during this heat wave. This led to thousands of evacuations, billions of dollars in damage, and just like the heat waves, were made about 10 times more likely due to climate change. On the other side of the world, in my home state of California, some of the most destructive and costly fires ever seen in the US tore through Los Angeles, killing over 24 people, destroying thousands of homes, and polluting the air and water. And since this smoke came from urban buildings, it contained a mystery cocktail of heavy metals, plastics, paint, and insulation particulates. While climate change wasn't the only reason for this fire, as arson and power lines initially started them, a study from the World Weather Attribution found that the abnormally hot summer, dry fall, and extreme winds were made 35% more likely due to climate change. A reminder that even the wealthiest parts of the world are not immune to the impacts of a warmer planet. Unfortunately, climate change brings both fires and floods. A warmer ocean leads to more evaporation, causing larger floods in regions like southern Asia. Pakistan saw much more severe flooding this monsoon season, combined with melting glaciers in the Himalayas, which can suddenly burst and swamp a village within hours. These floods were responsible for over 1,000 fatalities and displaced 7 million people. Another massive flood happened in Texas this year, with 2 to 4 inches of rain an hour collecting in the Guadalupe River. This caused the river to surge 26 feet in under an hour, killing more than 100 people and making it one of the deadliest floods in modern US history. This storm was supercharged with evaporation coming from a warmer Gulf of Mexico, increasing the likelihood of such an event. A warmer ocean has also led to one of the biggest hurricanes humanity has ever seen. Hurricane Melissa hit Jamaica and Cuba this October, feeding off the hot waters and rapidly intensifying from 68 mile-per-hour winds to 139 mile-per-hour winds in just one day, clocking a max speed of 185 miles per hour. This led to 61 deaths, millions of people impacted, and wiped out a third of Jamaica's GDP overnight. The Philippines were also hit by 2 back-to-back typhoons, Kalmegi and Fongwang, also fueled by above-average water temperatures in the Pacific Ocean. The typhoons were so large that damage also carried over to Vietnam, Thailand, and Taiwan, killing hundreds and leaving millions in flooded ruins. And a warmer ocean also harbors a different disaster: bleached corals. Scientists stated that this year marked the point where tropical coral reefs have crossed their tipping point, where waters are too warm for most of them to survive. I made a whole video about this tipping point a while back, so check it out if you want to learn more about what's going on. The coral reef tipping point is around 1.5 degrees C above pre-industrial temperatures, the same as the limit set by the Paris Agreement, which the UN is now stating we will inevitably cross. And in response to the urgent reality of the climate crisis, many nations have backpedaled on a sustainable transition, notably Argentina under Javier Milei and the United States under Donald Trump. The US, being the world's second biggest carbon polluter, has defunded many environmental policies and agencies in an ideological war on climate change.
It's the greatest con job ever perpetrated on the world.
In under a year, he has pulled the US from the Paris Agreement again, ended subsidies for EVs, solar, and wind, massively cut funding for NOAA and the EPA, appointed Lee Zeldin as head of the EPA, expanded offshore oil drilling, and censored mentions of climate change from federal documents, just to name a few. Unfortunately, reality does not get better when you ignore the problem, so the next few years will only push the US deeper into unsustainable practices. But that being said, most other nations around the world are still working towards a carbon neutral future. We've spent a lot of time going over the worst news of 2025, but what progress have we made to motivate and encourage us going into 2026? Well, for starters, global renewable energy has surpassed global coal energy for the first time ever. This is huge news, as coal has historically been the biggest fuel source for the electric grid and also one of the worst pollutants for both the climate and human health. Now, we are living through the end of coal, as nations heavily invest in cheaper and cleaner wind and solar energy. For the first time this spring, the EU saw more power coming from solar energy than any other sector, beating out both coal and gas combined. This, along with increased EV sales across nearly every EU nation, means both the European energy grid and their transportation sector are continuing to move away from fossil fuels. We're also seeing huge progress in China's renewable transition as well. China, being the world's largest carbon emitter, holds a huge responsibility over the path of our future emissions. And while they still have a lot of work to do, they have taken massive steps towards reducing their emissions, being the largest investor in wind and solar in the world. In the first half of 2025, they installed twice as much solar and wind compared to this time last year, with roughly 20% of their energy supply now coming from these renewables. This, along with leading the global production of electric vehicles, has many believing that China's emissions are close to peaking. This will drive major shifts in the fossil fuel industry and global emissions, beginning a shift away from coal, oil, and gas driven by both private markets and governments. Speaking of governments, the 30th Annual Conference of the Parties, or COP30, took place this year in Belém, Brazil, with some important climate action outcomes. I made a whole video about this if you want to learn more, but these are some of the key takeaways. Climate finance for developing nations is planned to triple by 2035. Indigenous people got 160 million hectares of land for sustainable stewardship, and over $6 billion were allocated to pay countries to protect their forests from deforestation. Regrettably, the results from COP30 were hindered by thousands of fossil fuel and agricultural lobbyists, which kept the final draft from including a global roadmap away from fossil fuels. But many nations did not want to settle for less. Led by Colombia and the Netherlands, 24 nations have voluntarily entered into the Belém Declaration on the just transition away from fossil fuels. This plan for a permanent phase-out of coal, oil, and gas falls short of the global movement required for a sustainable future, but far exceeds what was included in the final text at COP30. It's likely that more nations will join this movement as time goes on, strengthening support for an end to fossil fuels. And while it isn't directly related to climate change, the ozone hole has been healing rapidly since the passing of the Montreal Protocol. This year, the ozone hole was the 5th smallest it's been since the protocol was passed, proving that environmental policies can reverse the path of planetary destruction. If we had listened to lobbyists from DuPont, the world's largest producer of ozone-destroying chemicals at the time, we would still be dealing with the crisis and all the skin cancers and cataracts to follow from the extra UV radiation. But instead, policymakers and scientists saw eye to eye and agreed to work together to solve an environmental problem that threatened to harm every human on Earth. Now, we find ourselves in a much more complicated, but also very similar scenario with climate change. We must learn from the Montreal Protocol and rapidly decarbonize our world in order to keep Earth's climate as stable as possible. We must cast off the veil of denial that corporations and governments have drawn over our eyes and see the world in all its fragility, complexity, and delicate balances. We must accept the damage that has already been done, but not lose hope for 2026 in the face of such a massive challenge. So now, as the new year starts, let's all continue fighting for a stable climate, a carbon-neutral society, and a more just and equitable world for all of humanity. Thanks for sticking around to the end. As always, all the sources are linked down below. If you learned something from this, enjoyed this, or just want to see more climate science on YouTube, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to support Planet Zero. Happy New Year, and I will see you next time.